After a tumultuous first year in office, U.S. President Donald Trump is counting on a strong economy to improve his weak poll ratings. A Winter Olympics first for Nigeria's Super Eagles women's bobsled team. And an inside look at how the Voice of America's Africa division celebrates the new year. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. There is disturbing news out of East Africa tonight. The European Union is suspending a multi-million-dollar conservation project in Western Kenya, citing abuses against local tribesmen, including the reported killing of a man earlier this week. The government deployed additional rangers to the Embobut forest this month to evict members of the Sengwer community from their ancestral land in order to preserve forest cover. And Ruvaga has more.
78-year-old Thomas Chelimo is from the Sengwer community, which resides in Eldoret. Chelimo and his wife Pauline have called the Embobut forest home all their lives. However, on January 1st, their home, together with others, was razed to the ground. The Kenya Forest Service says it is evicting residents out of the forest as part of conservation efforts. The forest is a critical water supply area. Chelimo says that the forced eviction by the government agency will render them homeless and landless.
I was born and raised here. My father and his father were all born and raised here too. This is the only place we know and call home. There's nowhere else for us to go. My children and great-grandchildren all ran away in fear of the evictions, and I'm still looking for a way to bring my entire family together again.
Leah Torre-Teach and her husband Abraham say that although the government initiated a compensation program about 3 years ago, where resident families were given $4,000 each to relocate, genuine community members did not get any money at all.
We've heard that the government gave out compensation to our community members, but we haven't received any yet. There have been claims that members of the community received payment, but this is not the case, and that's why we are still here in the forest.
The European Union, EU, has suspended a $35 million 6-year program to protect the ecosystem in the area following reports of rangers using force on the local population. Roslyn Amadi, an international law expert and Kenya's former chief state counsel, says that the Kenyan constitution protects the rights of the Sengwer.
There is this dichotomy that if they are there, then they are destroying the environment. And I think that is what has happened, and that is the conflict that we are having. So whereas you have the right to preserve the environment for present and future generation, you also have the issue of development, and you also have the cultural rights of the people.
Naomi Baraza from Amnesty International says that the eviction of the minority community from their indigenous home is a violation of their fundamental right to shelter.
Kenya as a state is going against regional, international and local treaties that safeguard human rights, because the Sengwer issue, the rights of the indigenous people, rights to housing are anchored in our constitution, international law that Kenya is a treaty to. So it's purely a human rights issue, and it also affects the lives of the people.
The Kenyan government has not responded to VOA's requests for comment on the evictions. But for Thomas Chelimo and others from the Sengwer community, the evictions mean an uncertain future. Lenny Ruvaga for VOA News, Embobut Forest.
U.S. authorities are investigating a helicopter crash which killed senior Zimbabwe opposition leader Roy Bennett, his wife, and 3 others. Police say the aircraft went down Wednesday night in a remote mountainous area in the southwestern state of New Mexico, close to the border with Colorado. Another passenger who was injured in the crash managed to call for help. It is unclear what Bennett, shown here with his wife, was doing in New Mexico. The 60-year-old was an activist for causes helping the poor and a fierce opponent of longtime former President Robert Mugabe, who was forced to resign late last year. African ambassadors at the United Nations have suggested that U.S. President Donald Trump meet with African leaders in Ethiopia this month. The envoys met Thursday with the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, about the reported remarks President Trump made, referring to Africa with an expletive meaning dirty and impoverished. Diplomats at the meeting say Haley told them she regretted the political drama around what was said a week ago at a White House meeting on immigration. African leaders are due to meet in Addis Ababa at the African Union on January the 28th and 29th. Now, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has pledged not to let differences over a dam Ethiopia is building on the Nile River ruin relations with Addis Ababa. Al-Sisi met with Ethiopian Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn in Cairo on Thursday. Ethiopia hopes the hydroelectric Grand Renaissance Dam will make it Africa's largest power exporter. Egypt says it threatens its water supply, which relies almost exclusively on the Nile that runs from Ethiopia through Sudan and Egypt to the Mediterranean Sea. Addis Ababa says it will have no impact. Al-Sisi says negotiations with its two African neighbors are progressing and say a deadlock over disputed ongoing study on the dam's impact must end. U.S. President Donald Trump marks his first year in office on Saturday, January the 20th. Mr. Trump's tumultuous first year was unlike any other in recent U.S. political history, and 2018 could offer more of the same. Here's VOA's national correspondent Jim Malone.
For America's 45th president, it was a bold beginning.
From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first.
President Trump moved swiftly to cut Obama-era regulations and filled a vacancy on the Supreme Court. His biggest victory came in December, a sweeping tax cut bill.
This is the bill right here, and we're very proud of it. It's going to be a tremendous thing for the American people. It's going to be fantastic for the economy.
Passage of the tax bill could help Republicans in this year's congressional elections, says analyst John Fortier.
Republicans did get a tax bill passed, a significant tax bill in December. That was a major accomplishment for them, so that is something that has put them on a better track.
Mr. McCain. No.
But Trump's first year saw plenty of setbacks as well. There was a failed attempt to repeal Obamacare, numerous outbursts on Twitter, and at times inflammatory presidential rhetoric, including Trump's recent reported vulgar description of Haiti and African countries.
No, I'm not a racist.
That prompted outrage from Democrats, including Senator Cory Booker.
Those words just don't dissipate like mist in the air. They fester. They become poison. They give license to bigotry and hate in our country.
Trump's controversial and at times polarizing leadership style continues to hurt his poll ratings, despite a strong economy, says analyst John Hudak.
I think people are judging him on a variety of other factors other than the economy, and that explains his lower approval rating.
Hey, ho, ho! Donald Trump has got to go!
Trump's historically low presidential approval rating could also fuel Democratic gains in the November congressional elections, says analyst Larry Sabato.
When there's a wave, the water does not distinguish between those who've identified with an unpopular president and those who've tried to put distance between themselves and that unpopular president.
For 2018, Trump hopes a strong economy will improve his poll numbers. But the prospect of election losses in November and a Russia probe with no end in sight could make Trump's second year in office even more challenging than his first.
Well, and Jim Malone now joins me in studio for more on Trump's first year in office. Jim, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Vincent.
Now, in fact, we can begin with the point of the approval rating. President Trump has got like the lowest. It's a first year. How do you compare this with past presidents, by the end of their first year?
Well, for example, Bill Clinton had somewhat weak poll ratings, but he was about 10 points above where President Trump is at the moment. And the interesting thing is that in Bill Clinton's second year in office, Democrats suffered one of their worst midterm losses in Congress in decades. And in fact, power majority flipped from Democrat to Republican in the House, and that changed the whole trajectory of Bill Clinton's presidency. And that's a big concern for this year. We have congressional elections in November. What will be the outcome? Right now, Democrats are using the opposition to President Trump as a catalyst for their supporters.
Now, we talked a lot about the promises he made coming into office. In fact, the reason why he won the election. What is the report card looking like? I know you had something in your report, in your package, but how can he be rated?
So it depends on where you stand and who you voted for in 2016. His supporters pretty much are staying with him. Some of them are quite exuberant about him trying to keep his promises. He did so on the tax bill. He did so on trying to emphasize it's an America first world, as we saw from his inauguration. So his supporters show no signs of breaking away. The problem is, for the president, that number is not very high. And it's about 10 points down from the number he got in the election, which was roughly 46% of the popular vote. So how does he come back this year? That's the big question for him.
And there's certain things he made look like so easy that he's just going to do on day one or day two: the immigration bill, the Obamacare, bringing back jobs. What is being said out there about what he's done so far?
Well, I think, you know, the tax bill issue is starting to help a little bit of Republicans, and they hope it will blunt any Democratic momentum in November. But Democrats had some success in depicting that as something that basically helps the wealthy. So Republicans have to try to turn around that narrative. And there's just the unpredictable nature of the president. No matter what Republicans do to try to set their course, they never know where the president's going to come down on an issue.
Worst case scenario for him, he loses the House. What could that mean?
I think that would actually lead to a stalemated presidency. And this is something Republicans are concerned about. There's an outside chance they could even lose control of the Senate, which would really kind of bring gridlock back to Washington. But as we're seeing with this shutdown debate currently, we have gridlock already. So a Democratic victory, I think, in Congress, though, would make it very difficult for him to make some major achievements in the next 2 years of his presidency.
And be sure we'll call you back for some more analysis some other time. Jim, thank you very much.
Thank you, Vincent.
As always. Well, that's Jim Malone, VOA's national correspondent. Now, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook. So check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Now, coming up, Human Rights Watch calls on leaders to fight back against populists. Stay with us. Well, Human Rights Watch has released its annual report for 2018, which looks at the state of human rights in more than 90 countries. The organization says events over the past 12 months have shown that political leaders should be more willing to take on what it calls authoritarian populist agendas. Henry Ridgwell reports from London.
The report claims that human rights in the United States have come under attack since the election of President Donald Trump.
The attack on the judiciary, the attack on the press, his anti-Muslim ban, the demonization of minorities.
This week, President Donald Trump hosted what he called the Fake News Awards to underline his claim that US media are biased against him. His answer to critics is that he was elected democratically.
No, I'm not a racist. I am the least racist person you have ever interviewed. That I can tell you.
Human Rights Watch says the populist wave that delivered Trump's victory and Britain's vote to leave the European Union ended in France with the victory of Emmanuel Macron in the presidential election.
I think the lesson to draw from that is that actually democratic parties that believe in human rights and fundamental freedoms, should be much more explicit about that, should be standing up for those values.
Human Rights Watch praises the European Union for taking on what it terms authoritarian populist governments in Hungary and Poland, but criticises the bloc for its response to the crackdown on the media and political opposition in Turkey.
Almost a sort of Faustian pact that's been done. You keep the refugees away and we'll mute and downplay our criticisms about human rights.
Myanmar is strongly criticised in the report. About 700,000 Rohingya Muslims have fled a violent government crackdown into neighbouring Bangladesh.
One of the things that we're calling for in the report is much more concerted pressure to be applied to the Myanmar authorities. So why isn't there a clear call from key governments around the world for the leaders of the Myanmar military, to have targeted sanctions against them?
Human Rights Watch says the clampdown on fundamental freedoms in Russia is at its worst since the end of the Cold War. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi of Egypt comes under severe criticism for the repression of civil society groups and a spike in detentions and executions. Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari promised improvements to basic rights, but the report says these have yet to materialize. Human Rights Watch does highlight progress in the fight for gender equality, with the January 2017 Women's March in the United States morphing into a global movement. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. VOA's Africa division brings in the new year. We'll be right back.
In South Sudan, senior UNICEF official Henrietta Fore visits sick children in a Juba hospital and warns of damage that the country's civil war is doing to children. In Ivory Coast, Moise Lida Kwasi, a former defense chief for one of the country's ousted leaders, is sentenced to 15 years in prison for conspiring against the government. A French court's decision to dismiss a case against a group of French soldiers accused of sexually abusing children while on deployment in the Central African Republic in 2013 and 2014 has sparked anger in the country. In Liberia, President-elect and former football star George Weah will take office as the country's president on Monday, January 22nd.
Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. At the grand old age of 44 now, Sudan is slow on his feet. He lives at the Upper Jeddah Conservancy in central Kenya, along with two females, Fatou and Najian. There are no other northern white rhinos left in the world. All others have been killed for their horns and hunted to the brink of extinction by poachers. Now, last year, the Conservancy teamed up with a public relations company to launch a fundraising campaign. They listed Sudan on dating app Tinder, giving people the option to donate money. The campaign raised awareness and $85,000. The money raised is to help pursue an IVF breeding program that scientists hope will save the species. Next up, at Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week in Berlin, brands are turning heads for innovative eco-friendly creations and designs, highlighting tough femininity. Berlin-based Australian fashion designer Marina Homansender, who counts Lady Gaga and FKA Twigs among her fans, presented our latest collection, Ready to Fight, inspired by ski looks of the 70s and 1980s, and lots of camouflage. The design is known for her strong and conventional take on feminine style. Well, and finally, it's a girl for Kim Kardashian West and her husband Kanye West via surrogate. Kardashian West thanked their surrogate and the doctors and nurses, adding that their kids, North and Saint, are especially thrilled to welcome their baby sister. Kardashian West did not reveal the new arrival's name. It was unclear where the baby was born. The reality star and makeup mogul suffered from placenta accreta, a potentially life-threatening complication during her 2 pregnancies. And that's what's trending today. Now, you could call it African history in the making. Nigeria is due to make its first ever appearance at the Winter Olympics. The Super Eagles women's bobsled team says they are not heading to the February Games to be a feel-good side story. They're looking for a medal-winning performance. No African has ever competed in an Olympic bobsled event. Seun Adigun, Ngozi Onumere, and Aku Omeagwa are aiming for a podium place in South Korea.
It's still kind of an out-of-body experience right now. It's kind of surreal, you know, and I think that's just more so because like the official results for all the qualifiers comes out in January, but we're on like a very unique qualification to where as long as we had all the things that we needed to execute done, you know, we're punching our ticket to the games. And so it's really kind of weird to, you know, come out and be like, yeah, we're going, because it's like you kind of want to wait to enjoy that opportunity in that moment with everyone else who's also going to be qualified to go.
Well, the reality of competing in South Korea began in a Texas garage in 2014, where Adigun, the team's driver, first hammered together a makeshift sled out of wood and scraps. The former sprinter who competed in 100 meters for Nigeria at the 2012 London Olympic Games then recruited brakewomen Onu Omere and Omeoga to share her dream, and we wish them all the best. Now, the Voice of America is a melting pot of people from all parts of the world. And once a year, various VOA departments hold end-of-year parties showcasing their diversity. Africans at VOA, however, choose to hold their annual party at the beginning of the year. Here's Esther Githui-Ewart.
They are television and radio broadcasters, as well as experts on social media platforms. But Africans at the Voice of America bring with them a rich culture of music and dance. But the best is in their various African cuisines. Welcome to the party. The food is set, and guests lined up to fill their plates and stomachs. Neguse Mengesha is VOA's Africa Division Director.
So what we do is actually we show our diversity through our food, our music, our culture, our fashion show also.
Yemi Jimason works in the Public Affairs Office.
Everything about the African cuisine, I mean, it's the roots, it's the foundation. And so I love all of the different tastes, the different ingredients. It's nice to have that culture and that mix from all of the different parts. It kind of builds our community, because we are just one big community. And this plate just represents that.
Hafsat Mohammed of VOA's House Service did what African women do in Africa. Strapped her baby boy on her back, ready to serve.
Everybody is excited. They're trying different things. You know how Africa is diverse, and the food right here is diverse, so they enjoy it.
Matoka Norris, a television producer for Africa 54, enjoys the warmth the Africa Division Party brings to VOA employees.
Everybody loves each other. Everybody's jovial. The food is fabulous. The attitude is wonderful. This is the new year. Every year we celebrate this way. And it's a fabulous place to be.
Anastasia Tudieshe of VOA's French to Africa says the party brings a deep sense of pride.
Everybody wants to come here. This is the biggest party in the building. We put the music and we dance to it, and we take everybody with us. We have inclusive cultures. I would say that that's also what people expect when they come to the Africa Division Service party. They feel welcome, they feel warm, they feel nurtured, they feel restored. It's amazing. It's an amazing feeling.
In fact, it is a celebration of diversity. When you walk here, there are Nigerians, there are Kenyans, Ethiopians, Ugandans, Tanzanians. Every one of us are here in this working. Of course, Americans also working, serving the African audience.
For Chelsea Milko of the Public Affairs Office, the aroma of the food takes her back to northern Uganda, where she volunteered as a Peace Corps.
Rich and spicy and hearty and everything. There's a little, this is a complete meal here. This has got everything you could ever want on one plate.
This celebration also honors the expansion of VOA's Africa division.
The last 2 years we have been expanding, not only in radio but also in television and digital media. Our program content has been expanding a lot. We have also additional resources. More people have been coming. We celebrate that also.
The guests were also treated to a short play, with David Bande, host of the African Beat music program, playing an old tired husband and a skilled hunter.
Fati, my wife.
While French to Africa Service reporter Solange Nyamulisa played his wife. And Sande Shomari of Swahili Service played the sneaky lover in the neighborhood. The Master of Ceremony, Yehez Wuhib of English to Africa Service, recited an African poem encouraging fellow broadcasters to use their position to inform Africa.
We have been given a platform. Seize the moment. Inspire, educate, and inform the continent from Cape Town to Cairo before the African sunset.
Esther Githu Ewart, VOA News, Washington.
Well, we'll leave you today with Jupiter Bokonji and Okwesi International. These are musicians from the Democratic Republic of Congo who recently performed on VOA's Music Time in Africa, hosted by Heather Maxwell. Now, from all of us here in Washington, have a great weekend.
Benga yo, benga yo, benga yo. Ah, benga yo, benga yo, benga yo. Luka kai to gari leko, aye kule ye kore, aye sangue a poco. Prevena tone lula tolila, e kisho toka te quiero kondi. Poco yoro ma nyamera sombo, ata toka ya nyamera sombo, tato poti luka o. Lugaito garileko, aye kudeye kore, aye sangue a poco, e venata melula dolila, e kiso choka tetelo konji, poco yolo manyamea sombo, atato kaya nyamea sombo, tato konji luka o, atato konji luka o, goya oye, dolali leo, atato konji luka o, goya oye, dolali leo. Aye kudeye kore, aye sangue a poco, e venata melula dolila, e kiso choka tetelo konji, poco yolo manyamea sombo, atato kaya nyamea sombo, tato konji luka o, atato konji luka o, goya oye, dolali leo.
Welcome to English in a Minute. This expression sounds like a violent way of eating, but it's actually not always about eating.
Here is your Russian book, Anna. Thanks for letting me borrow it.
Oh, are you done with level 1 already?
Yeah, I finished last week, and I've already finished level 2.
Wow, you are really sinking your teeth into learning Russian.
Well,